session. Today we are going to take part two of communication skills program. During the last session last week, this time we had done part one in which we talked about the general concepts about palliative care, what were the barriers to palliative care, and some do's and don'ts. And we also talked about how to conduct an interview. I called it history taking 2.0.
Hello, sir.
So I hope you remember. Can we start sharing the?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Start off.
Yes, yes. Ah, right. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay. Today we hope to cover how to communicate bad news. Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. Some people are messaging good afternoon. Uh, so And we will also talk about collusion. What do we do when the family member comes to us and says, please don't tell it to the patient? And then we'll also talk about how we can deal with somebody who is getting angry. So, this is something that we all face once in a while when somebody, the patient or the family member or a relative, gets angry at us. So, how are we going to deal? Okay, so let us start today's session. Can we have the next slide, please? So when we talk about communicating bad news, usually the pattern that is followed is either you tell the patient everything, uh, which is called the full disclosure model, or in our environment in India and most of the Asian countries, we do not uh, tell it to the patient. We only speak to the family. We only tell the bad news to the family. We usually don't tell the bad news to the patient, and that is called a non-disclosure model. A full disclosure means you fully disclose to the patient. A non-disclosure means you do not disclose to the patient. So these are the usual two models that we see being practiced around the world. Either you tell everything to the patient or you don't tell to the patient. Next slide. The other thing that we have to understand is patient's rights. The patient has the right to know. If the patient wants to know, the patient has the right to know. Similarly, patient has the right not to know. That means if the patient does not want to know, then the patient has the right not to know. Can we go back the previous slide? Now, when we are talking about full disclosure model, what about the patient who does not want to know? So if we are practicing full disclosure model, that is, if my policy is I disclose everything to the patient, but what if the patient sitting in front of me does not want to know? Then I am infringing on the right of the patient not to know. Similarly, if my practice is non-disclosure model, that is, my practice is I do not tell to the patient, I only tell to the family member. Then what about a patient who wants to know? If that is the kind of patient sitting in front of me, but my practice is I do not tell it to the patient, then I am infringing on the right of the patient to know. So this model, both the models have a problem when we put it in the context of the patient's right. That was the next slide. Please, can we go to the next slide? So if we are talking about the patient right to know and the patient's right not to know, we have to understand we have to create a model which suits the kind of patient in front of us. So hence a full disclosure model and a non-disclosure model both has problems. So we have to have a different kind of model to accommodate the patient's rights. So next slide, please. So what can be this another model that we can think of? Next slide. So this different kind of model is individualized disclosure model. What that means is we have to create a model that suits the person sitting in front of us. For example, if you go to a textile shop to buy some clothes, you may be buying a ready-made cloth, but even if you are buying a ready-made cloth which kind of suits you, fits you, you still give it to the tailor to make some correction before you finally wear it. You give it for alteration, to either shorten the length or something like that. So basically, when we talk about communicating bad news, we have to tailor make it for the person in front of us. So that is why we call it an individualized disclosure model, not a full disclosure model, not a non-disclosure model, but an individualized disclosure model. So what does that mean? It means you have to find out first and foremost whether the person sitting in front of you wants to know or does not want to know. So that is the first task. And once you have confirmed if the person does not want to know, you do not tell the patient the bad news. If the person wants to know, then you have to find out how much the patient wants to know and give only that much of information, not less information, not more information, only the right level, right quantity of information. So, two things, whether the patient wants to know or does not want to know. And second part, if the patient wants to know, how much the patient wants to know. And you give information accordingly. Next slide, please. So before we go on to how to communicate bad news, we need to understand a few things. And one of that is who should communicate bad news. When I take a class, usually people will say the doctor should communicate bad news, right? Because they say doctor has information. But it is also important to know that most of us are handicapped by the problem of medical jargon. When we talk to common people, non-medical people, they many a times do not understand what we are saying because we put a lot of medical jargon in our conversation. We, without realizing, we use a lot of medical jargon. So it is important that we convey information in a simple way that any common man can understand. But more important than that is we have to earn the trust of the patient. Remember, sometimes you as a medical person may not be the most trusted person of the patient. The patient may be trusting his or her friend, not even a family member sometimes. Or it could be a family member or a relative. But we as healthcare providers, we have to make sure that we earn the trust of the patient. Only then they will believe what we say. Otherwise, we may say something, they may not believe us. They will say that we are saying something just like that. So it's very important to earn the trust and then we convey the information in a manner that people can understand. And last but not the least, we should have the skill to communicate bad news. And that skill is what we are learning today. Next slide. So before again going to how to communicate bad news, we have to ask ourselves, why should we communicate bad? Why should we communicate bad news to a 70-year-old gentleman with metastatic cancer which has spread all over? Let him live his life in comfort and peace. Why should he know, right? So the answer to such kind of questions is the person, each one of us will have some or the other things that we have to finish. It could be a financial transaction, it could be writing a will, it could be telling the password of the bank account number to your spouse or your children, or it could be telling them where all you have invested or what all debts you have created. It could be a lot of issues related to money. It could be something related to property. If you know that you don't have much time, you will perhaps make sure that it is very clear what is going to happen to the property. How are you going to divide it among your children? So it is a lot of things regarding money, property, will, etc. can be sorted out before the person is not in a position to do it. Similarly, the person may have his or her own desires, small things. Maybe he or she wants to meet somebody with whom they were very close friends but have not been seeing for many years. They want to see them once. So that is one desire. Or they may want to go to some place. It could be a holy place, or it could be some place of some great memories, nice memories. So they may want to go and visit a place, or they may want to do some activity, or simple things like having something, some food that you always wanted to have but have not been, trying it because of diabetes or hypertension or cholesterol, etc., etc. So there are so many things that a person may want to do or experience before they are no longer able to. Similarly, it is also a chance for the person to uh, atone for any mistakes that they have done. It is a time to ask for forgiveness to somebody, or it is time to forgive somebody. So there are a lot of things that a person may want to finish before they go. So that is what the first point is about, a chance to close life's business. When I say life's business, that does not mean only about money matters. It's all about money matters, human relationship, desires, practical things, everything. So if somebody has an incurable progressive disease, the earlier you tell the bad news, the more time the person has for uh, doing everything possible uh, for closing their lives business. The second important point is, I think that presentation is no longer visible. Is it visible to the?
No, sir, some technical issues, sir.
Okay. Is it visible to the others, or is it only not visible to me?
No, sir, not visible, sir.
Okay, then maybe I will have a pause. Or while you are getting it sorted out, I'll continue the talk.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
The second
Okay.
important thing that you have to consider is that in many places where people with incurable, progressive, advanced medical conditions are in the hospital, the patient has not been told, but the family understands. So they say, okay, you take the patient home. But when the patient goes home, the patient is not satisfied. The patient says, take me back to the hospital. So the family takes the patient back to the hospital. And then after some time, because the patient is not getting better, even though the family understands why the patient is not getting better, the patient does not understand why I am not getting better. And then the patient may say, take me to some other hospital. And then the family is forced to take the patient to another hospital. And this way, the patient uh, goes from one hospital to the other hospital. Sometimes from modern medicine, it goes to Ayurveda or homeopathy and back to modern medicine. So this way, hospital hopping and doctor shopping happens. And this leads to a lot of poverty because everywhere they go, if you're not at home, you have to pay even for a glass of water, right? So everything becomes an expense. Staying out of home, food, water, medicine, investigation, room rent, nursing charges, doctor charges, everything becomes very expensive. And then they have to sell off their house, their cow, and eventually the families on the street, and the patient eventually dies. So all of these things happens because the patient has not been told the truth at the right time. Remember, we tell the patient the truth only if the patient wants to know. So this hospital hopping and doctor shopping leads to lot of poverty, lot of patients, their families have to sell off everything that they have. And not only that, this creates a lot of
No.
yeah. Sorry, I got a call in between. So
Okay, sir.
yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So, so not only it causes a lot of financial trauma, it also causes a lot of mental trauma because the patient hopes to get better at a new place. Every new place the patient goes, the patient says, now I'm going to get better. But what happens? The same situation because the patient's medical condition is incurable, it is advanced, the patient does not. So what happens is that this creates a lot of mental trauma to the patient. Wherever I'm going, I'm not getting better. And then initially the patient may blame the medical people, they may blame the hospital for not being good enough. But eventually, after going to many places, the patient starts blaming the family, and he or she will accuse the family that they are purposefully not taking care of him or her, and this creates a lot of trauma in the family and a lot of negative energy is created inside the household. Apart from that, the other thing, barrier between the patient and the family, because the patient has not been told, family usually knows what is going on, so they have to enact a drama in front of the patient. In front of the patient, they have to behave as if everything is normal. But what happens is that they are not able to, the family is not able to control their emotion and they have to run away from that place, maybe go to the bathroom and cry, and then they wash their face and come back in front of the patient with as if everything is normal. But the patient can read the body language of the family members. He or she understands there is something wrong. There is something going on. But the patient feels helpless. The patient feels alone because nobody is confiding what is going on. So the patient feels isolated. The patient sees that everybody is conspiring against him or her. And then there will be relatives coming from far away to come and see the patient. And they don't talk normally to the patient. They'll be standing at the door and looking at the patient with a lot of sympathy. And then they will be whispering to the other family members in the next room. The patient can hear all of this whispering, can see all of this behavior and know something is going on and understand that they are not telling the truth to him or her. It is like being in a jail with glass walls. That is, you can see everybody, but they are not on this side. The patient is alone on one side, and rest of the family, relatives, rest of the world is on the other side. So this is the barrier that gets created between the patient and family because the patient does not know, everybody else knows. And in palliative care, we talk about total care, physical, emotional, social, spiritual, existential, etc. So when the patient does not know what is going on, you as a palliative care provider or you as a healthcare provider, how are you going to provide psychological support to the patient? How are you going to talk freely and honestly with the patient? How are you going to help the patient cope with what he or she is facing if you can't talk honestly and freely? So you cannot provide total care when the patient does not understand what is going on. And that is why it is important to communicate bad news. If you don't communicate bad news, there's a lot of problems coming in. So it's very important to share information honestly in a simple language that people can understand. And remember, this is only with patients who want to know. We will not force information on a person who does not want to. And at this point, I'll ask a question. Think, if you are in that patient situation, God forbid, if you are the person who has an incurable progressive medical condition and you are in reasonably physical and mental health, at this point of time, would you want to know what is going on? Would you want to know the truth? And if you knew, then there's a lot of things that you have to do, you have to finish. There is also a chance to tell the loved ones that you love them. There's a chance to hug and cry. All of these chances are denied to our patients because we do not talk to them. So just think about this at a personal level. If you were the one who is in that position, would you want to know? Some of you may want to know, some of you may not want to know. Either way, it's okay. But whatever be your response, you can put in the chat box whether you would want to know or you would not want to. Shall we move on? Next slide, please. So, how to communicate bad news? This is worldwide. This individualized disclosure model. We practice the spikes protocol. That means you're setting up the interview. That is, you create the right environment for the interview. Remember, communicating bad news can be equated to an elective procedure. You have to find a time free for this. You cannot do it among other things you do. You cannot do it at the side of the corridor. You have to find a time for it. You have to find the right place for it. In personally, in my case, I usually communicate this the sensitive discussions in the evening because by evening most of my work is over, and in the evening area, my OP area, most of the people would have gone, so it is quiet, and I have some time, and and that is the best place and time that I find to communicate that. Assess patient's perception. So this is what I was talking about in History 2.0. We have to find out what the patient knows about what is going on. And I use the word insight. They are using the word perception. Both is the same thing because we are just trying to find out what does the patient understand about his or her situation. Obtain the patient's invitation. So we will proceed only if we are sure that the patient wants to know. Next, giving knowledge information. This is once the patient indicates the patient wants to know, then we share the information honestly. But remember, we will share only as much as the patient wants to know. And then when we are communicating such a sensitive issue, naturally there will be an emotional reaction. We have to allow the emotions to flow and wait till it is over. Only then we then go to the next step of planning of what can be done, what cannot be done, and then we close the interview after that. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, next slide, please. I'm getting some of the other phone calls. Sorry about that. Yeah. So this is how we are going to learn communicating badness. Think of it as a surgical procedure. So there is a procedure of communicating bad news. Next slide. So like any other procedure, there is a pre-procedure preparation. So what is the pre-procedure preparation when communicating bad news? Up to date yourself on the patient's medical condition. Even if you know the patient, still it is a good practice to go back and read up the patient's file and the documents. And then, as I said earlier, allot a dedicated time slot for this. In my case, I always see that I try to make sure that I do such kind of communication in the evening when I have some time, and set the environment and use active listening skills. Some of the things that we talked about last time. Active listening skills. Some of the do's and don'ts that we talked. Next slide. So when you start the interview, take the patient's history and get the patient's insight and concerns and explore if the patient wants to know. And if yes, then you give a warning shot. So this is the gist of the matter. We will use the technique that we talked about last time when we talked about history taking 2.0. If you can just recall all the steps: greeting, getting yourself comfortable, and getting the patient party comfortable, etc., etc. So all of that thing you will be putting into practice here. And if the patient says, yes, I want to know, you do not start telling the bad news. You first give a warning shot. Next slide. So an example of a warning shot is, if it is something serious, would you still want to know? If it is something serious, would you still want to know? So that is a warning shot, an example of a good warning shot. In Malayalam, we would say, കാര്യം ഇത്തിരി സീരിയസ് ആണെങ്കിലും അറിയണമെന്നുണ്ടോ? And in Hindi, we can say, अगर बात कुछ सीरियस है, क्या तब भी आप जानना चाहेंगे? अगर बात कुछ सीरियस है, फिर भी आप जानना चाहेंगे? तो फिर भी आप जानना चाहेंगे? So it is important that you first convey that it could be something serious, but still would you want to know, right? That is the whole idea of communicating or giving a warning shot. If it is something serious, would you still want to know? Now, this gives an opportunity for the person who does not want to know to go back. The person may give an excuse like something like, I will come back after 2 weeks, you give me my medicines. Or the person may not say anything, may just keep looking down at the floor, will not make eye contact. Or the person may tell you frankly, no, I don't want to know. You tell it to my son, you tell it to my daughter, you tell it to my wife, or you tell it to my husband. It's something like that. So it will be very clear that the person is not interested, at least not interested now. Maybe interested later on, but presently this person does not want to know. However, if a person looks into your eyes and says, yes, I want to know, then there is no confusion. This person really wants to know. Only then you will proceed. So the big important point of giving a warning shot is, this is the point where you differentiate between those people who want to know and those people who do not want to know. Next slide. After giving a warning shot, the atmosphere changes. Now they realize that we are going to tell them something very serious. So the atmosphere changes. And this is what I was talking about. The patient gets a chance to reconsider the decision. If the patient says, yes, I want to know, then you tell the story of the patient to the patient from the beginning. So this is like telling a story. This is a narrative approach. Next slide. So narrative approach is narrating the story of the patient to the patient from the beginning. For example, you could tell the person, your local doctor wanted to get an X-ray done to find out whether it was something like a TB or pneumonia or something like a cancer. So you can just casually mention cancer among many things, and then you can say that the X-ray showed something like a shadow, and that is why your local doctor referred you to the big hospital in the city. So this is a starting point where you are giving some information, but not the main information. And then you can proceed further by saying, next slide. You can proceed further by saying that uh, in the big hospital, they wanted to do a scan to find out whether the shadow was something serious like a tumor. So next slide, please. So what happens is that you are gradually escalating the information. You are gradually increasing the intensity of the information from something like a shadow, it becomes a shadow, and from a shadow, it becomes something like a tumor, and from something like a tumor, it becomes a tumor, and from a tumor, it becomes something like a cancer. So I will just narrate the story. So this X-ray was taken to find out whether you had something like a tuberculosis or a pneumonia or something like a cancer. And the X-ray showed something like a shadow. And to find out what this shadow was, you were referred to the city hospital. And there they did the CT scan and they found something like a tumor. And to find out whether this tumor was something serious like a cancer, they did a biopsy. And in the biopsy, it came out something like a cancer. So gradually, when you tell the story, even you move along, you gradually move up in the information, right? In between, you give pauses because when you give pauses, it gives time for the patient to analyze the information that he or she is getting. Remember, if the patient is not making eye contact, you have to give a pause to the story. Because if the patient is not making eye contact, it could be either, next slide, it could be either because the patient is processing this new information, is trying to understand this new information, or it could be that the patient had enough of information. So it may not be the full information, it may be only half information or three-fourth information, but whatever. If the patient is not continuing to make eye contact, it could be either of these two. So the question is, how will we know? So if there is a confusion, then we can ask, should I proceed? Do you want to know more? Or something like that. मैं अभी और आगे बढ़ूं क्या? Something like that. And in this case, the patient says yes. That means the patient wants to know more. You can proceed with the story. If the patient does not reply, does not make eye contact, then that means the patient had enough. Either, whatever be the situation, this is a time when you can expect an emotional reaction. Emotional reaction is usually in the form of tears. The patient may cry. Sometimes some may get angry. Some people may just sit in stunned silence. Whatever be it, it is important not to try to calm them down or try to be nice to them. The most important thing is to allow ventilation of emotion, allow the emotion to run. What you have to do, next slide, is not to do something but just be with the patient. Don't do anything, don't say anything, just be with the patient while they are ventilating the emotion. Just be there. And once the emotion is gone, once they had cried enough, and once they have regained their composure, then you can proceed with talking to them about what can be done, what cannot be done, etc. etc. Next slide. This once they have got back their emotion, then they may ask some question. Am I going to die? Is there a treatment, etc. etc. So answer everything honestly. Sometimes if they will say something like, am I going to die? I'm so scared, or something like that, uh, in a very emotional way, always ask them, why do you say that? And then they will let you know why they said it. And it's possible that you may have a solution to their problem, or at least you will know why they said what they said. Right? So most important part is you have to be honest in a very gentle and sensitive. Next slide. Most important thing is do not give false hope. Don't say everything will be all right. We are there with you. You know, when the truth is it is not going to be all right, don't give false. But you can always give achievable. For example, most of the time when I'm dealing with patients with who are terminally ill, I tell them that your disease can't be cured, but I'll make sure that you remain comfortable as long as you need to be. That is a promise I can fulfill. I tell them I'll make sure that you don't suffer in pain. I'll make sure that you don't suffer breathlessness. I'll make sure that you don't suffer as long as you need it, or as long as you're alive. I'll make sure that you don't suffer. So this many a times when I tell this to the patient and family, most of the time they say that is all that we wanted to hear. We just wanted to know that you will take care of us, even though my disease cannot be taken care of. So this is very important that we give them achievable hope. I never say I will cure disease. I will cure your problem. I never say I'll cure your disease. I always say I will take care of you, even though your disease is incurable, even though it is progressing. I'll make sure that you are taken care of. I'll make sure that you are comfortable. As a palliative care physician, I can do it. It is something that I'm trained for. It is something that is an achievable hope I can give to all my patients. Next, before you close the interview, uh, always ask, is there anything that you have to, is there any other questions that you have? Is there any comment that you have? And once that they say no, then you can close the interview. When I say by leaving the door open means that you have given them some contact number that they can call. If you don't want to give your personal number, don't give. You give them some official number, so hospital number, department number, whatever, or on-call duty person's number, something you can always give. Next slide, please. After the procedure is over, there's a post-procedure follow-up. Visit or call the patient. Visit the patient if the patient is IP, or if the patient is OP, then you can call them in the late evening. If you are busy, you can give this responsibility to one of your team members to do it. Next slide. Okay, so that was all that was regarding communicating bad news. And now there are two small topics and we'll finish that, and thereafter we will take questions. So the next topic is collusion. Collusion is basically a conspiracy of silence, which usually our experience in India is where the family members come to us before they bring the patient and tell us, please do not tell it to the patient. So they will tell it to the doctors, they will tell to the nurses, they will tell to everybody. Please do not tell to the patient. So basically, they are requesting us to enter into a conspiracy of silence where we do not tell it to the patient. Whatever discussion they say, please have with us, but don't tell it to the patient. Next slide. Why do they do this? Why do family members do it? They do it because they are trying to protect their loved ones from harm. And what is the harm? Because family thinks that if we tell the bad news to the patient will collapse and die. Many times the family member tells us, please don't tell it to my loved one. If the moment he hears it, then he is going to be no more. So basically, family is very scared, family is very anxious, and they are trying to protect their loved ones from bad news. And where is the source of bad news? We are the source of bad news, because the patient is likely to hear the bad news from us doctors, nurses. So they come and request us, please do not tell it to the patient. Next slide. Remember, the family is scared. When we talk about patient care, remember, it is also important to care for the family. Please understand the family is scared. And we have to acknowledge that fact that when we talk about patient care, we also need to care for the family. Next slide. Do not challenge the family's belief. You may think that the family is unnecessarily creating a lot of fuss, but they have their own belief system, and for everybody, their belief system is important. And hence, do not tell, oh, why are you unnecessarily getting worried? We do this every day. We are professionals, etc., etc. Doesn't matter. That is your belief. But the family's belief is you will kill their loved ones just by mentioning the word cancer. So do not challenge their beliefs because it will only make them more anxious. It will only make them more afraid, and they may take the patient away from you, and you will never get a chance to do whatever good you could do for the patient. So do not challenge the family's belief. Next slide. Agree to collude. So when somebody comes and tells me, please don't tell it to the patient, I say, okay, fine, no problem. And I also ask them, so what have you told him or her? And then they will say, oh, we have said that it is just an ulcer, and everything will be fine. So I tell them, so shall I also say the same thing? So when I say this, when I agree to collude with them, the anxiety of the family comes down, and it's not necessary that they start trusting me straight away, but at least their fear and anxiety comes down, and my behavior with the patient and my behavior with the family is what is going to earn the trust. Also, my palliative medical skills with which I am able to make the patient comfortable. I take away the pain, I take away the breathlessness, I take away the restlessness with my palliative medicine knowledge and skill. That also helps me earn the trust of the uh, patient. Similarly, if you are a nurse, your palliative nursing skills will make the patient more comfortable. Your communication skills will earn the trust of the patient and the family, and your nursing skills, which will make the patient comfortable, which is equally, if not more important than the palliative medicines that I give to the prescribed. All of these together, when we work together, we will earn the trust of the patient and the family, and only then the family will start trusting. Next, most important thing is that we have to build a relationship with the family. We have to cater to the needs of the family. Remember, they have their own belief system. It's important to listen to them. The very act of listening to them is going to earn their trust. Next slide. And once they start listening to you, because you have listened to them, and then they start listening to you because you have earned their trust, that is the time you have to bring in the topics we talked about. Next slide, please. That is the time when they start listening to you, when they start trusting you. That is the time when you should be bringing the topics which we talked about a little while earlier when we were talking about communicating bad news. We talked about finishing life's business, hospital hopping, doctor shopping, barrier between patient and family, etc. All of these topics you bring to the family only after they trust you and start listening to you. And once this happens, then they will change their attitude, and then they will ask you. Many times a family member says, "I can't tell my loved one, but can you please tell the truth to him or her?" And at that point of time, I say, okay, I will help you out. So next slide. So when they trust you and then they seek your service to communicate bad news to the patient, that is the time that you have the green signal from the family to communicate bad news to the patient. But remember, I always tell the family member, okay, you want me to talk to the patient, but I will communicate bad news only if the patient wants to know. I will not communicate bad news if the patient does not. So most of the time the family says, okay, fine, no problem. Remember, it's also possible that despite your best efforts, and especially if you are new with communication skills, your conversion rates of converting a family who from do not tell to please tell, this conversion may be difficult in the beginning stages, but as your skills improve with experience, then your conversion rates from don't tell to please tell will improve. But even if you are the most skilled or the most experienced person in the world, still there will be many situations where the family refuses. They say no, do not try. In those kind of situations, do not push your agenda because it will cause friction between you and the family, and that should be avoided. It has to be only a gentle persuasion and never a forceful persuasion. So please remember, be prepared for failure. There is no shame in trying and failing, but not trying is definitely shameful. So always try to manage pollution. Be prepared for failure. There is no shame if you fail. The only shame is if you don't try. So there I will stop that topic. I think that is the last slide regarding pollution. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, yeah. So the next topic is anger. Many a times you may have faced anger by the patient or the family. Remember, anger is a high energy consuming negative emotion. Anger is a negative emotion. It consumes a lot of energy. So the simple logic is you cut off the energy supply, the anger should go away. So we have to find out how we can do that. Remember, people don't wake up in the morning and decide, I'm going to get angry. People just get angry because they are subjected to a lot of emotional stress. And at one point of time, it bursts. And many a time, you, as the healthcare provider, is the person facing it. Not necessarily because you have done something wrong, but just because you are the most convenient person nearby. So people get angry or people may cry because of emotional stress. We feel sorry for people who cry, but we are very uncomfortable when somebody gets angry. Please remember, anger and crying are both different forms of emotional stress. And anger is a negative emotion, just like crying, but anger consumes a lot of energy. So it is easier to control. You just need to learn how to cut off the energy supply. So how to cut off the energy supply? Next slide. Whenever you see somebody very angry, most of the time the person who is angry cannot sit because there is so much of adrenaline flowing inside the body. The very angry person who is shouting and cursing, etc., is usually somebody who is standing in a very aggressive. So to facilitate this anger to flow away from this person, what you have to do, if you are sitting, stand up. Because if you sit and the person is standing, you are by your body language saying that I'm superior to you. And that will make the person more angry. So if you are sitting, make sure you stand in front of the person who is getting angry at you. Do not sit. And when you are standing in front of the person, you can bend slightly in front. Do not cross your hand in front of your chest, because when you cross the hand in front of your chest, you are giving this, you're blocking this person, and you may make the person more angry. Keep your hands down and bend slightly forward, your spine slightly forward, because this way you are showing respect to the person. At the same time, you also make eye contact. Even if you are feeling afraid, make eye contact, because this shows that you are confident. So you are standing confidently but respectfully in front of the person who is getting angry. Do not say a word, just listen. And when the person is speaking angrily, you stand in this particular way and nod your head like you are agreeing with whatever the person is saying. Do not say a word, just stand there respectfully but confidently and nod your head. And this allows the person to ventilate the anger, but you are not giving any energy, negative energy back to the patient, to the angry person. So this anger cannot be sustained for long. Within minutes, this anger will come down. And once the major anger comes down, remember, The anger has not gone away. From a big flame, it has come into the sim position. Like in a gas stove, you have the sim position. So some anger is still there. At this point of time, you can talk to the person. You tell them, I want to know more about this. Can we sit down somewhere and talk? I want to know more about this. Can we sit down somewhere? So invite the person to sit and then allow the person to talk more. The more the person talks and explains the problem in this position, the more the person's emotional stress will be ventilated, and that is how you can manage the anger in a clinical situation. Now, remember, this is how you deal with day to day our clinical anger situation. When you are facing a big crowd which is very angry, this technique will not work because a crowd is a law and order problem. We are medical healthcare providers. We are medical professionals. We are not policemen. We do not know how to wield a lathi, or we are not trained for that. So if it's a big crowd, run away and let security people deal with it. If you are dealing with somebody who's under the influence of alcohol or other drugs, there also you cannot deal with in this manner, because here, when somebody is under the influence of alcohol or drugs, again that is a law and order problem. We are medical care providers, we are not law enforcement authority. In that kind of situation, let the security people or the police people take care of it. You try to remove yourself away from that place. Day to day anger situations you can manage. I think that was the last slide. Is there any more slides? Okay, this is important. What about your own anger? You should take care of your own anger. And we talked about some self care in the previous session last week. Remember, our work is very stressful. It is possible that we get angry, and if we get angry at the patient or the family member, it's possible they will get angry at us, right? So one way of preventing an anger situation is to make sure that you are calm, and for that you may need to collaborate with a friend or a colleague. By you help each other out. If you may be, if you're a nurse, you may be the two people working in the same nursing station, or or you find somebody who is always nearby around. So the job of this person is to see whether you are getting angry, and how what are the signs when your body is tense, or if the voice is going on high pitch, or if you are getting over sarcastic in your comments, or if you are showing signs of anger in your facial expressions. So all of, for example, constant staring. So any of these things, if your colleague who is a spotter for your anger notices, that person's job is to tell you, hey, I think you're getting angry. And when the person tells you, I think you're getting angry, it will be a time for you to check yourself whether, and the person should tell, I noticed you behaving like this. I noticed you are very tense. I noticed you are looking very angry. I noticed your voice is very raised. I noticed you are being very, very sarcastic. I noticed you are little negative in your comments. So when that person tells you this, it will be time for you to realize that and then try to cool down. So this way you help each other and make each other realize when you are slowly getting angry. Because if you get angry and say some harsh words, then it cannot be taken back. So it's very important to prevent yourself from going into anger than trying to manage a damage after you have got angry with somebody. So that is how you can manage your own anger. Next slide. I guess that is the end of it. If you have any questions or comments, regarding communicating bad news or pollution or anger management, please put it in the chat box. Shiba, please coordinate that. Maybe we can have about 5-10 minutes on that.
Okay, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
So one question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Harishankar, from Harishankar. We are explaining the current situation to family members about their patient disease process. Unfortunately, suddenly during this session, the patient may die. Is there any another approach to breaking bad news?
See, if the patient is very sick, the patient can die anytime. So it is important that we communicate bad news to the family at the earliest. I mean, there is no excuse of not communicating bad news to the family at the earliest. I mean, we are talking about communicating bad news to the patient. We are saying you should communicate bad news to the patient at the earliest. We have to give the patient a chance to know the truth when the patient is fairly physically and mentally uh, reasonably healthy. Uh, if the family has to be told about the bad news uh, as early as possible. So there is no spikes protocol. Is we are talking about the talking to the patient. When you're talking to the family, you of course you may not talk in front of the uh, patient, but in for the family you have to communicate in as short a time the what is the most important part, and then take their questions. We have had occasions while I was in Pallium India. I know one experience where a patient was brought in gasping, and I think it was my colleague Sunil who was there. I think I was also there. I think, and we asked them. I mean, the patient was referred from another hospital to our place in Palem, India, and we asked them what have they told. They said the patient was very serious, and so when we heard that they have been told the patient was very serious, then we said okay, so they probably understand. So then one of us explained that this patient is gasping, he is likely to die shortly, and the family members were totally surprised. They said, but they didn't tell us that he was uh, so bad. But so we told them, but they told you, but you yourself told us that from the other hospital they said that he was serious. So the family said, yes, they said they were serious, but we did not realize he was this serious. So please understand that we have to talk to the family in very clear way, in simple way. We have to bring the word death, we have to bring the word dying into our conversation with the patient's family member, because many times when we use euphemism, serious and not doing well, prognosis is bad, they don't understand what we're saying. We have to say it in very clear, simple language, but our tone of voice should be such that it should seem a very very sensitive in a very very sensitive way. So that is how we have to convey. There are no easy shortcuts to it. It is hard job communicating bad news It's a lot of hard work. It is hard intellectually, it is hard at the emotional level. How can we manage collusion between patient and what was the question?
Sir, one more question. Though the families say not to disclose, but the patient is asking you about his or her condition, what to do?
Yeah, so this is something that we often have to manage. What we usually tell the patient is that I don't have enough information uh, to uh, to talk to you right now. I'm looking for more information. This is how you buy time, and meanwhile you try to uh, manage the collusion with the family. It's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing. The patient is saying, "Tell me what is going on," and the family will be telling you, "Don't tell to the patient." These are not simple things, and of course, this you have to learn by seeing how people with experience in communication skills are doing it. This is something that we learn as mentorship. Uh, However, amount of Zoom sessions will not solve the problem, unfortunately. And this is something that we learn by the bedside. That's why bedside teaching is so important, and we have to continue bedside teaching even in the times of corona.
So next one, how can we manage collusion between patient and patient party?
Yeah, this is also possible. The patient uh, knows the truth, and the family knows the truth, but both of them are not communicating with each other. Both of them may be communicating with us. So again, this we have to deal with it. I mean, we have been dealing with this kind of situation also. So many a times we ask the patient party and the patient why there is a reluctance to, be honest with each other when both the parties know. So many a times what happens is the patient may not know that the family knows. The family may not know the patient knows. So it's one important thing that we do is we update their information. We inform the patient that the family knows everything. We inform the family that the patient knows everything. And then many a times we have a joint meeting where we will facilitate uh, communication. We'll facilitate breaking down this barrier between the patient and family. We will talk together with both the patient and the family together. And when we say that, the patient knows and the family knows, and then they are sitting in the same room near each other, then it comes out in the open. And this way, it helps them to break the barrier. If the patient does not want the family to know his or her condition, then we have to ask why. And again, it is just like how you manage pollution with the family, you manage pollution with the patient. Are we having more questions?
No, sir.
Okay, so most of the questions were related to pollution.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a difficult topic uh, on practicing on the ground. It is much more difficult than communicating bad news or managing anger, actually. And be prepared for failure. That's what I always say. But never stop trying. The more you try, the more your skills improve, and eventually uh, your conversion rates improve. You will have better persuasion powers, which because of which people will change their point of view. It doesn't come easy. You know, and even if you have years of experience behind you, even then, I am ready for failure every time I try to manage pollution. Uh, I mean, of course, my conversion rates have improved since uh, my earlier younger days, but uh, failures still happen.
No more questions, sir. Can we move on to the case presentation? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Today, the case presentation will be done by Sister Purnamaya Thapa.
Yes, ma'am, sir.
Yeah, okay. Sister. Over to you, sister.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me chance to this presentation. My name is Purnamaya Thapagurung. Designation palliative care nurse. My organization INF Green Pasture Hospital Palliative Care Service Pokhara, Nepal. Next, please. My patient details are here. Age 56 years old, gender female, diagnosis non-case of invasive duct CA left breast presented and large fungating marks over left chest origin alone and pain left upper limb lymphedema plus bed sore third stage on sacrum. Next, please. Presenting complaints, severe pain, her left hand, swelling left hand and left leg, could not sleep well. History of illness, first reported to Western Regional Hospital Pokhara, but referred to Manipal. Pain and swelling had increased in size. Mastectomy, left side breast on 2076 means 1 year ago, month of Sawan, on Manipal Hospital, Pokhara. She was asked to do various investigation, including CT scan of chest and left hand and left legs, followed by 6 cycle of chemotherapy at Manipal Hospital. Examination 2077 means this year. 662 Green Pasture Hospital means our hospital, INF. Temperature 35.8 degrees Celsius, BP 140/90, pulse 88, respiration rate 18, oxygen saturation 99% in room air, CNS oriented to time, place, and person. Medications, syrup morphine 5 mg 4 hourly, syrup lactulose HS daily, tablet paracetamol 1 gram 4 hourly, tablet amlodipine 5 mg HS for 1 week. Psychological aspect, fear, she has fear of diagnosis of cancer, had no idea about her condition, function. She is not able to walk and pain, so could not sleep well. Expectation, want to be given treatment and she want to know her disease condition. But her family member are fear to say real her disease condition like cancer and disease prognosis. Psychological aspect, hope. Her source of hope is her younger daughter. Organization sometime went to church which is near her home. Main concern as per the 3-visit Breaking Bad News, preparation done, ensure privacy, find out whom the patient want to be present, family, her daughter. Number 2, what does the patient know? She knew her went to cancer hospital and chemo taken. So she said, maybe my disease is not too going well, etc. What does the patient expect to be hearing today? her disease condition, so given warning shots like I'm afraid it looks rather serious and pause the patient to respond. Summary. I had done question like open question, what the things that bother most at the moment, physical, emotion, health, social or spiritual issues. So her concern is unmarried daughter and she love her much and worry to her future. Her daughter love her mom, so she want to protect her and hide her disease condition. This is a collusion. Plan for palliative care home visits after discharge from GPS hospital means our Nepal's GPS Green Pasture Hospital. Continue counseling and treatment. I had done question like open questions. What the things that bother you most at the moment? Physical, emotional health, social or spiritual issues. So her concern is unmarried daughter and she love her so much and worry to her future. Sorry, that spelling is wrong. So yes, next please. Discussion point. My question to my team means your team, our team. For me, dealing with emotions very hard to listen to it. Like her daughter told me, how can I lose my mom without her? I'm going to alone. My other family are not like mom and cry. How we could support her? Any similar story from your side about how we breaking bad news and how we could dealing with collusion? Thank you so much. Again, my name is Purnamaya Thapagurung from Nepal.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Purnamaya.
Thank you so much, ma'am, sir.
Thank you, Purnamaya Thapa. You have done an excellent job.
Thank
Not
you.
only
Thank you,
not
sir.
only of making the presentation, but I think you have done an excellent job of dealing with the patient
Thank you
and her
so much.
daughter. I think the question that you have put up is how we could support her, and are there any similar stories from the other participants in this group? I think we can have an open session.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, you can give your suggestions on how we can support her daughter and the patient in various dimensions, physical dimension, emotional dimension, social, financial, spiritual or existential. Please give your suggestions. You can give your suggestions in chat, or if you want to speak, I don't know whether Shiba that is possible. Let us hear from the participants. Yes,
On chat.
Ms. Shankar has saying that we can use NGOs and other charitable organizations in the
For
area. Yes, that's an excellent suggestion. It is remember we all need to link up with each other. There are some things we are good at. We have expertise. There are some resources we have, but there are a lot of other people who are doing various other things. For example, you may be a palliative nurse, but your patient's children need books, and there may be some other NGO which is focusing on children's education. So it's very important for you to reach out to such NGOs and then make sure that we work together so that our patient and the families can benefit. So excellent suggestion. Reach out to other NGOs and other organizations. Let the suggestions keep coming. or if you have some similar experience and you would like to share. Yeah, she is a church goer, so the church groups can also contribute in supporting her in many dimensions. Help her spiritually, financially, emotionally. Yes. Would we have enough time for sharing of some stories? Would somebody want to share their story? Um, in maybe, if you could finish it in 2 minutes, you can share a story in 2 minutes, please, if somebody would like to share.
If you want to share a story, you can unmute yourself and share. Anybody?
Mr. Harishankar would like to share a story.
Yeah.
Yes, please
Hello.
go ahead.
It is
Yes,
audible.
please. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you?
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead. We are eager to listen to you. You have to unmute yourself.
Mr. Harishankar? Yeah. You can unmute yourself and talk.
Yeah. Hi, ma'am.
Right.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Mr. Harishankar. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I am Harishankar as a palliative care nurse in Tata Trust. I am also share a little bit experience, just 2 to 3 minutes. Last 2 months back, I myself also treat one palliative patient. She is diagnosed as a left lateral tongue, CA tongue. Unfortunately, she is living in Malaysia. In that country, without any diagnostic findings, the doctors should start morphine sulfate for relief of pain. So she using these drugs, morphine 10 mg, 20 mg, 30 mg, like IR and SR format. When the tumor size will be increasing day by day, again she come to India, and here again we take biopsy and our PET scan. So that time the diagnosed it is under final stage, advanced stage. Their family members againly they bring to go on Malaysia. Suddenly they live in airport and they left all their family members. He is alone. Those who are identified and they sent to our hospice care. So that time their psychological issues is very different, and we find out their family members, and we are also take history to their family members. Their family members told she is suffering from schizophrenia, uh, so and so things they told. But what it happened, it means they are very economically they are very poor. Their only one son is there. He is the uh, head of the family. He is the incoming earner. So financially they lack and the lack of financial and psychological support also. So that's why their husband lives there in airport. One day that member is coming to our hospice care. So that time our voluntaries and our doctors and our social workers were also to examine that particular patient. Their psychological consent is very different. Why? Because main thing she wants to know what is happening to me, and is there any end of for my disease? It is a burden of my family. Uh, she was not aware of his recurrence of his present disease. Uh, he is thinking about their family and their one daughter is there. The daughter are related to their marriage and their job also. She feels very depressed and anxious about their disease condition. And finally, she's getting sleep disturbance due to because of severe pain under Vascor. The pain is 9/10, and the main concern about their family is the financial issues. If something is happened, and spiritual issue also there. He believes. She believes God. When was diagnosed at the time of diagnosis of this cancer, he was very angry about God. So these are all the spiritual issues, and family issues also. Main concern is a lack of financial support. Here we observed most of the significant palliative care issues. The main thing is pain management and oral care and their disease progress. And finally, biggest significant palliative care issue is the lack of financial support. These are all the issues we observed in that patient. Thanking you.
Thank you, Harishankar. That was excellent narration. It's very informative also. Shiba, you were saying something. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, sir. Just say thank you.
Okay. I think we have just about enough time for one more story.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So last chance. One more story. It's very important to share stories because when we are sitting in our own small hospitals, hospices, and clinics, we feel very alone. And sharing of such information, such stories, helps us connect with each other, helps us knowing that there are so many people like us who are facing these kind of problems. We are not alone. We are not the only people facing such problems, such issues. There are a lot of us. There are a lot of people like us who are doing excellent work. So uh, it's a big morale booster and also a reassurance that there are many people like us who are doing this kind of work. So that is the advantage of sharing stories. So would somebody else like to share their experience? If you could finish in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, like how Mr. Hari Shankar did. Shiba, one story from your end, if you can
No, sir.
do it in 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm sure there are plenty of stories. Anything that you have come across recently in Palim India? Or some old stories, anything. And then we can conclude.
Hello, sir. I have a personal experience of mine. I would like to
Yes, please.
share.
Yes, please. You are Madam Jessie Paul, and
Yes,
please
yes,
introduce yourself. And where are you working? And then get on with what you have to say, please.
yeah. But actually, I'm just working in Delhi AIMS NICU, neonatology.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's my personal experience. It's with my brother-in-law. What happened actually?
Yes,
I mean, yeah. Well, he got retired. I mean, it's a 4 years before story only. I mean, so he went to Coimbatore. I mean, thinking that he had some urinary stone in his. I mean, the problem with that. So when he landed up in PSG Coimbatore, he undergone a surgery, and they opened it and seen that it was a colorectal cancer. So they just sutured back and told him nothing can be done for that. So he came back Delhi. So we shown in AIMS, and the doctor told hardly 1 or 2 months will be there for him. So that was the time how to reveal to him. He was so inspired to live, like just got superannuated, and he wanted to do so many things he wanted to do, like he was planning for, like then so they said nothing can be done, only the palliative things can be done for him. Then my sister-in-law took another oncologist. He convinced for doing the resection and the chemotherapy. So for that he stood well, and he could go himself for the chemotherapy and come back. And unfortunately, exactly after 1 year, we had a very severe lymphedema and all that oozing and everything was there. So unfortunately, we lost him. So this was a situation where, I had so much of tension in my mind, how to tell him, how we can reveal the things, how we can talk to him, all this. That was my concern actually. So how we go about it? Like, we have any?
The pain that you experienced still shows in your voice, Jesse, if I may say so. I mean, that's very courageous of you to share such a personal experience with all of us. Thank you for that. But as I said, the pain still shows in your voice. Uh, See, these are not easy conversations. That is why we need to be trained in such kind of things. And especially when it is somebody close to your heart, it is all the more difficult to have a conversation on life and death, on having an honest conversation. Now, this is where I guess uh, uh, probably maybe something that you could have done was you could have talked to the palliative uh, consultant who I don't know whether you already consulted somebody or not, but these are something that a palliative consultant, a doctor or a nurse in palliative care are trained to deal with. So we always help out families who are dealing with difficult conversation issues, and we help out the family and the patient have this kind of conversation. So that is now in the past, but please understand, this is what I want to emphasize: the importance of talking difficult things to talk. We most of the time don't talk about these kind of things because it is difficult to talk, and that is why it is important to talk about. Because if we don't do it at the right time, the pain just lingers on among those who survive, because there just doesn't seem to be closure. And a perfect example is what we just heard from Madam Jessie Paul, who just mentioned. The amount of pain I could feel in her voice is just the fact that it is important to talk about difficult things at the right time, in the right way. And that is why we need to learn it, how to do it. I know that is perhaps not what you call enough of an answer, but at the present moment, I guess that's the best we can do uh, for you. and I guess it is 4:30. It's past 4:30 now. Shiba,
Yes, sir.
so can we just conclude?
Yes, sir. We can conclude. So, sir, thank you, sir, for the excellent presentation, and thank you, Sister Purnamaya, for the patient story. And once again, thank you, Sister
Thank you,
Jessie
ma'am.
and Mr. Harishanga for the patient story. Sir, do you want?
Yeah, and that's what I was about to add. And thank
Yes.
you all for the active listening and the active participation, and also for sharing, uh, some very difficult personal experiences.
Yes, sir. Okay.